And graphene oxide is a superconductor of electricity. And so you think that the brain is processing information, perception, electrically. It's communicating with the rest of the body electrically and vice versa. And therefore, if you can get graphene oxide into the brain, then you're going to rewire the way that the brain processes information. And the other impact, there are many, but this is another impact of graphene oxide, is that it amplifies the impact of electromagnetic fields inside the body. So if you come into contact with an electromagnetic field, say the cloud, then its impact will be greatly magnified by the graphene oxide.
Ну, включено именно когда идет вызов. Пока выключено. Сейчас я набираю номер. И смотрите, что будет происходить. Вот он, вызов пошел. Смотрите, что теперь. Ну. Вызов идет, если вы можете смотреть, видите. Такая вот непонятная хреновина. Интересно, в голове у нас то же самое творится.
And the idea is that perceptions and thought patterns and emotional reactions are fed through this cloud, this technologically generated electromagnetic field, to the receiver, the self-replicating nanotechnology in the body, and it basically becomes the human mind.
Futurist Ray Kurzweil predicts that medical nanobots will be commonplace by the 2030s. They'll be in everyone's bloodstream. He is particularly interested in trying to solve the problem of high bandwidth brain-computer interfaces. We can only get so far with external scans, and understanding what's happening in the brain dynamically is very difficult. However, if you had a swarm of very small nanobots, they could actually go through your blood system, infiltrate your brain, and just sit there and observe what's happening, communicate with the neurons through electrical charges or the release of hormones and other chemicals. And I think there's two major consequences of this. First is that we would expand our thinking capacity, as Kurzweil calls it, creating artificial neocortex. And that, of course, is basically the beginning of the singularity, because that allows us to exponentially expand the size and capacities of our brains. And the second big change is that those nanobots could probably provide virtual and augmented reality that seems just as real as IRL, because they could fake phantom signals coming from anywhere in your nervous system. It's really hard to imagine how those two abilities would change the world. But again, I think it's safe to say that at that stage, the technological singularity would not be too far away. Back to the current for a moment. The nanotech market was already worth 121 billion in 2020. And there's one estimate out there that says it will grow 25% every year until 2029.
So when Ray Kurzweil at Google said years ago now that by 2030, the AI will be connected to the human brain. And from that moment, that connection, AI will do more and more of human thinking until human thinking is negligible, i.e. deleted eventually. That is how they're doing it. And, you know, Elon Musk's role often is not being at the cutting edge of technology, it's selling a concept. And what he's doing with Neuralink, which is light years back, I mean, that take a bit of your skull away to put bloody wires in your brain. He's selling a concept, even though he's way off the pace. And interestingly, he was interviewed and he was asked an obvious question. Well, you say, you know, all these people are going to, you know, have Neuralink connected to their brains, but who's going to want a piece of their skull taken away to do this, you know? And he said, oh, you might not have to do it that way, he said. You might be able to go in through the veins. And that's exactly what they're already doing.
I mean, one of the reasons that I didn't want the jab is because it was rumored to have nanoparticles in it to start with. Well, gee, surprise, surprise, that's actually panned out to be true.
But what I find interesting about this nano tech is all the different stuff that they're doing with the radio waves, why this wasn't widespread known to people. I mean, honestly, the information's out there, and I will share a different website with you guys. The National Library of Medicine also has an article on that. I'll leave down in the description for everybody. And it goes into this, but it's able to cross into your brain through your bloodstream, and it can be controlled. So this is scary stuff.
This is just now I find that I've been getting poisoned by literally my favorite drink with the same crap.
A brand new study which was just published looked at the contents of a certain medical procedure which shall not be named. And in this study, the authors claim to have found artificial nanostructures, which they refer to as self-assembling nanostructures, which look like this. Now, these were only found in the mRNA-containing ones, and the shapes range from crystals, filaments, spirals, all the way to nanotubes. They found that the shape of these changed over time and were particularly responsive to external electromagnetic fields. But before you get excited, there are some serious problems with this study. First up, there's no publicly available ORCID record for this researcher, so we don't know if she's published anything in the past and what training she has. Next, she's a gynecologist, and whilst that might not necessarily be a problem, we really want this study being done by molecular biologists who have the resources and the tools at their disposal to be able to make sure this was a valid study. Next up, the lab isn't registered from anywhere that I can see, and therefore we have no way of knowing that it's actually a sterile environment. What this means is that the things that we're looking at right here could simply be artifacts. With that in mind, whilst I'm not a scientist, I think we have to be very, very cautious about these results. But even if we discard the study as bunk, you might not know that there are numerous other accounts. We're talking like more than 40 or 50 individual accounts of scientists with genuine expertise in the field who have found something very similar. They found 3D nanostructures in the shots, and some authors have speculated or said that they closely resemble carbon nanofibers and might be graphene oxide. Since graphene oxide was definitely not on the ingredients list, you might be wondering what the hell it was doing in there. And you might be amazed to hear what the science actually says about this. Let's just say that reality is much stranger than fiction these days. And if you don't believe me, just check this out. It turns out that scientists have been working with graphene oxide for a very long time, particularly in the context of micro and nano robots. Now, you might be wondering, what are micro and nano robots? Well, these are basically tiny little machines, pieces of technology. They're invisible to the naked eye. You cannot see this, but these things can be implanted into the body either by injection, inhalation, or even through the gut. Now, they can be programmed to achieve certain effects. This can be on organs, on tissues, or even specific cells. So for drug delivery, for altering gene expression, they have to be driven or powered by some kind of external energy source. This can be body heat, it can be UV light, but a lot of the research is looking at external magnetic fields to power these things.
Когда я первый раз это обнаружил, даже страшно стало. Ну все, я выключаю. Вот, пожалуйста, все. Так не действует ничего. Как только мы опять звоним, ну, вот он пошел вызов, и вот он, пожалуйста.
And they can be used as what are called biosensors, so they can receive information from external sources or from internal sources, and then they can transmit that information. Think of it a little bit like a chip or like a tiny Wi-Fi router, which is in the cells, and it can literally absorb radiation and transmit information to external sources as well. And on this topic, you can see from this paper, these researchers recently developed a remote controlled probe which was able to target specific cells. And it just so happens that graphene oxide is one of the key materials that they use for these nanotype robots. The field of research is more widely known as nanorobotics. It forms the basis of what is now called the Internet of Bio-Nano Things. You think of this as essentially a form of transhumanism. The Internet of Bio-Nano Things is envisioned to be a heterogeneous network of nanoscale and biological devices, so-called bio-nano things, communicating via non-conventional means. So this is molecular communications in non-conventional environments, e.g. inside the human body. The main objective of this emerging networking framework is to enable direct and seamless interaction with biological systems for accurate sensing and control of their dynamics in real time. That means using nanorobots to control living systems, i.e. the human body. Okay? Of course, this new frontier of technology has been framed as a medical breakthrough which will revolutionize treatment of chronic disease. However, it's important to realize that this hasn't just garnered interest from within the medical field. In fact, the key players who are funding this research include the likes of DARPA and other military intelligence agencies. And when you hear what they want to use it for, well, that's where I'm going to end this video on this platform.